Hello everyone, my name is Daniel, and today I'll be sharing a story that left a scar deeper than I ever thought words could carry. Before I begin, please be advised, this story involves abuse, specifically violence against a pregnant woman by a family member. If that's difficult for you, I completely understand if you choose to skip this one. I just want to say before anything else that the baby in this story does end up okay. Physically, at least. The title of this story is, My Mother-in-Law Thought I Cheated Because I Was Carrying a Girl. At 8 months pregnant, she attacked me. My name is Elise. I'm 32, and my husband, Mason, is 36. We live in a small town near the Oregon coast, where the fog rolls in low and often hides the worst parts of life, but never long enough. Mason's mother, Lorraine, is 75. Her husband, my father-in-law, was well into his 50s when Mason was born, a final attempt after years of disappointment. Mason was their miracle, the son who would carry on the name that had been passed down for generations, literally. Mason was the 5th man in the family with the full name Mason Gregory Hale, each born to a son, never a daughter. In fact, no girl had been born on that side of the family in over 110 years. It was a long-standing joke that Hale men simply couldn't make girls. Until me. Mason and I were married in the fall of 2018. Our wedding was beautiful. I wore a vintage lace gown, the kind that makes you feel like time slows for just a moment. We had laughter, dancing, heartfelt speeches, and under the glow of string lights, everything felt perfect. Until it wasn't. Just as we were about to leave for our honeymoon suite that night, Lorraine pulled me aside. Her eyes were glassy from wine, but her words were sharp as broken glass. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Now go make us a real Mason the Sixth." I laughed nervously, not knowing how to respond. Mason and I left, pretending the comment was harmless. 2 weeks later, on a quiet night in our rented cabin, we conceived our daughter. A few months later, during an ultrasound, we found out we were expecting a girl. We were overjoyed. But when we announced it to Mason's family, silence followed. Not joy, not love, just disbelief. Some even insisted the tech must have been wrong until the day she was born. That's when the whispers began. Whenever Mason wasn't around, Lorraine would tilt her head toward our daughter and say, "That nose isn't from our side," or worse, "She doesn't look like a Hale." Others in the family joined in. I stayed quiet. I told myself Lorraine was just old and bitter and maybe jealous of the bond Mason and I shared. I tried to be patient, tried to protect their relationship. After all, she didn't have long, I thought. Maybe she deserved some peace. By the time our daughter turned 1, it was undeniable. She looked just like her father. Same dimple in her left cheek, same deep-set eyes. It should have put the whispers to rest, but it didn't. Now I'm pregnant again. Another girl, and I begged Mason not to tell his mother. I just wanted to have a few more months of peace before the cruel comments started again. But Mason, bless his optimism, insisted that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. He was wrong. When we visited them, he shared the news. "Another girl," he said with a hopeful smile. Lorraine's expression shattered. She began to sob, violently shaking her head. Then she pointed at me and screamed, "Get out of my house, you lying whore!" I froze. My heart thudded so loud I could barely hear Mason as he shouted back at her, demanding she apologize. "What is wrong with you? You can't talk to her like that, in front of your granddaughter!" But Lorraine was beyond reason. Through her sobs she wailed, "Not ours! Those girls aren't ours! She's a slut. She fooled you once, but I won't let her do it again." I instinctively clutched my belly. Our daughter stood by the fireplace, staring at the chaos with wide eyes, too young to understand, but old enough to feel something had gone horribly wrong. Lorraine's face twisted as she shouted at me, "I took you in. I let my son believe that brat was his, but not again. I won't stand for another lie." Mason stepped between us, his voice shaking with rage. But I couldn't hear him anymore. My ears were ringing, my legs weak, and deep inside me, the baby kicked, frightened, I imagined, by the turmoil surrounding us. It was in that moment that I realized, no amount of patience, no hope, no silence would fix this. The rot had already sunk in too deep. Mason adores our daughter. He said it countless times over the past year and a half, how he never imagined he could love anyone so fiercely until he held her for the first time. He told me that in any situation, if it came down to choosing between me, our daughter, or his mother, he'd choose our little girl without hesitation, every single time. That's what made what happened next all the more jarring. The moment Lorraine spat those vile accusations, calling our daughter illegitimate, screaming that I was a whore and that Mason couldn't possibly be their father, Mason lost it. I saw something in him I hadn't seen before. His voice cracked with fury as he shouted at her, "You are completely out of line! How dare you speak about my daughter like that?" He stood between us, chest heaving, hands clenched. "We're done here," he growled. "Until you come to your senses, you will never see any of us again." She tried to mutter something else, but he cut her off mid-breath. "By the way, Mum, I love that little girl more than I ever loved you." And with that, he slammed the door behind us. I couldn't hold it together. In the car, I sobbed until my throat went raw. Mason kept one hand on the wheel and one on mine, whispering apologies and shaking his head in disbelief as I broke down. That 2-hour drive back to our coastal town felt like the longest stretch of road we'd ever traveled. That night, I told him everything. Every snide comment Lorraine had made, every insult she'd whispered when he wasn't around. He was livid, and he held me as I cried myself to sleep, our daughter curled up beside us, still too young to understand the storm surrounding her. For months afterward, we cut them off completely. We blocked their numbers, ignored the flying monkeys on Facebook who tried to relay messages from Lorraine. We weren't interested in half-hearted excuses or manipulative guilt trips. We focused on us, on preparing for the arrival of our second child, another girl. But as my due date neared, I hesitated. Maybe it was guilt or just the aching desire for closure. But I told Mason I wanted to try. I didn't want to bring another child into the world with this kind of weight hanging over us. He was reluctant, but agreed. We reached out, offered them a chance to make it right. Lorraine wept on the phone, said she missed Mason, missed her granddaughter, claimed she didn't want things to be like this. So we agreed to meet for dinner in a few weeks, but only the two of us. Our daughter would stay with my sister that night. It wasn't safe, and we knew it. When the day came, we drove up to their house in silence. I gripped Mason's hand the whole way. Dinner was served. Chicken, mashed potatoes, a salad no one touched. We made small talk, awkward and forced, like strangers pretending to be family. And then Mason cleared his throat. "Mum," he said, "this has all been fine, but we need to talk about what happened. You know what you said. You owe Elise an apology." Lorraine looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she replied slowly, "if she gives me the paternity test." "What?" Mason blinked. "The paternity test," she repeated coldly. I'm not apologizing until I know I'm wrong, and I'm not. You couldn't have made two girls. It's biologically ridiculous. Something inside me cracked. I stood up, eyes already blurring with tears. I couldn't breathe. I fumbled for my coat and bag, telling Mason we were leaving. I turned toward the door, but Lorraine stood faster. She lunged toward me and grabbed my shirt. "You're not running away from this!" she shrieked. "You lying whore! You need to face what you've done!" Mason shouted for her to let go of me, rushing across the room. And then her hand flew. She slapped me, hard, across the face. The world tilted. I stumbled back, gasping, my ears ringing. Mason shoved between us, yelling at her to back off. He told his father to call the police. But Greg, Mason's father, just sat there, stunned, muttering something about handling this privately. Lorraine wasn't finished. She snatched a heavy snow globe from the mantel and hurled it toward me. It struck the base of my skull with a sickening thud. I fell to my knees, one hand on my bleeding head, the other on my swollen stomach. She kept coming. Candlesticks, coasters, a glass ashtray. Whatever she could grab, she threw. Mason screamed for her to stop, trying to shield me. She tried to kick me while I was down, but age and frailty betrayed her, and she lost balance. That's when Mason shoved her. She stumbled backward and crashed into a shelf by the door. And we ran. In the car, I wept, repeating over and over, "She kicked me. She kicked the baby." My head pounded, my belly ached. At the hospital, I needed 6 stitches. They kept me for 4 days under observation. The baby, miraculously, was okay, but nothing else was. Lorraine ended up with 2 fractured fingers and is now claiming that Mason used excessive force, injuring her neck when he pushed her to stop her from attacking me. Greg, my father-in-law, called an ambulance for her that night, though not out of concern for us. Once they arrived, Lorraine told the paramedics that Mason and I had assaulted her in their doorway over a dinner we weren't invited to. That's how she framed it. A free dinner turned violent, as if we'd shown up demanding food instead of peace. The police came later that evening, and for a moment my heart sank at the sight of flashing lights. I remember holding Mason's hand, trembling as they asked us to recount what happened. We gave them our statements and showed them the report the hospital required us to file because of my injuries. After comparing both accounts, they took our side. But even so, because Lorraine insisted she was the victim and wanted to press charges against Mason, the officers had no choice but to temporarily detain him. He was released just a few hours later, after Greg finally cracked under pressure and admitted what had really happened. The officers returned and arrested Lorraine for felony assault against me. And that's when the pleading began. Greg reached out to us repeatedly, begging us to reconsider pressing charges. He said no one was really hurt, that it had all been a misunderstanding. "She's old," he said. "She's confused, sick. She didn't mean it." He told us we were being cruel to lock up a 75-year-old woman. But I wasn't just hurt. I was pregnant and bleeding and stitched back together with trembling fingers. And even if we wanted to let it go, it wasn't in our hands anymore. The hospital filed the report, and the state picked it up. It wasn't something we could undo, even if we were foolish enough to try. Now we're home, and everything is quiet. Too quiet. I'm on strict bed rest, waiting for our second daughter to arrive. She's due in 8 days, though I wouldn't be surprised if she came earlier, with everything my body has been through. Mason has taken the week off work to care for me and for our little girl, who is still so confused about why we haven't seen Grandma in weeks. I keep thanking fate that we didn't bring her with us that night. I still have nightmares about what could have happened if she'd been hit instead of me. To cope with the absurdity of it all, I half-jokingly told Mason that once the baby is born, we should order official court-certified paternity tests for both girls and send copies to Lorraine, in jail. A final middle finger, I said. He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. Then he said we should make extra copies and send them to every relative who entertained Lorraine's delusions, along with a letter that simply says, "Goodbye." None of them would ever see us or our daughters again. It was dark humor, but it was something. We were clinging to whatever moments of relief we could find. Despite everything, we are thankful. The baby is still healthy. My body, though bruised and exhausted, is hanging on. I've started sleeping on the couch because lying down hurts my back too much, and Mason brings me tea and rubs my swollen feet every night. He's trying so hard. I see the pain in his face, the guilt, the anger, and the grief. Because no matter what she's done, Lorraine is still his mother, and the thought that she might go to prison for what she did to me, his wife, eats at him in ways I can't touch. I've been trying to let him cry when he needs to, and in turn, he holds me when I break down too. We've been spending our nights just waiting. Waiting for the baby to come. Waiting to hear about the restraining order. Waiting to be granted a court date. Waiting to find out how much the hospital bill is going to cost us. Waiting for this nightmare to just end. This morning, Mason took our daughter to the park so I could rest. While he was gone, I updated our support post. I never imagined it would get so much attention. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people read it, shared it, left kind words, encouragement, even their own painful stories. Some told me they'd had daughters after generations of boys in their families, and their relatives celebrated, threw parties, took out newspaper announcements, even a billboard, someone said. I read that and cried. Cried because that should have been us. Because I wanted that joy so badly. Lorraine will be released soon. Greg's posting her bail this morning. Mason and I have already started the paperwork for both a restraining order and a no-contact order. In our state, they're separate processes, so we'll have to go to court twice. Our lawyer advised us to pursue paternity tests through the court system, so there's no question of validity if they're used as evidence. I'm trying to keep faith. Mason has been everything I needed him to be. Fiercely protective, loving, but I can see how all of this is breaking him too. And I wonder, late at night when I can't sleep, if maybe this all could have been avoided. Maybe if I'd demanded a test after our first daughter was born, would that have changed anything? Mason tells me I'm being too hard on myself. He says this wasn't my fault, that Lorraine would have spiraled no matter what. But guilt is heavy, and regret is even heavier. Mason had taken our daughter out that morning to grab breakfast and a few snacks for the house, giving me a moment to rest in the quiet. I was perched on the edge of our couch, one hand resting on my swollen belly, trying to remind myself to breathe through the sharp little aches that came and went. I watched the wind stir the branches outside and thought, despite everything, how much I loved this man and the life we had managed to build out of so much brokenness. Family, I've learned, isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who listens when you're sobbing on the bathroom floor, who fights for you when you're too tired to stand. And Mason, he has shown up for me every single day. He's reminded me what love looks like and what it doesn't. He's helped me believe, in the deepest, most fragile parts of myself, that I'm not some villain, not some shameful secret. But the cost has been high. He no longer sees Lorraine as the mother who raised him. He talks about her now like she's a stranger, a dangerous one. I can't help but feel responsible for that loss. I never wanted to tear them apart. I only ever wanted to feel safe. And now, there's this hole in him, something empty I can't fill, no matter how hard I try. I hope that me and the girls can bring enough light into his life to help him find peace again, even if it never fully heals. I know many of you have followed our story, and I truly thank you for giving me this platform. Writing this out, hearing your kind words, it has helped more than I can say. There will likely be more updates, especially once the baby is here and court proceedings begin. But this update, this one's been hard to write. Not just because of the insanity we've lived through, but because of the guilt I carry. The part of me that whispers late at night that maybe I could have stopped it. I know Mason disagrees. He tells me I'm being unfair to myself, that Lorraine was always going to unravel, no matter what. Still, I remember the night she turned to me, eyes cold and unforgiving, and said, "Now go make us a real Hale." That was after our wedding when we were heading to our honeymoon suite. Her words didn't feel like a blessing, they felt like a demand. I laughed it off then, but it haunts me now. And then there's Greg. After everything, he had the nerve to ask us to drop the charges. As if her age erased the bruise on my shoulder, the cut on my scalp, the fear in my daughter's eyes. As if the woman who tried to kick my unborn child deserved mercy just because she's older and sick. I remember thinking, what kind of man protects a monster just because he used to love her? About 2 weeks after the assault, I updated the online post I'd written, the one that somehow went viral. A lot of you probably saw it before it was taken down by moderators. Apparently, it got featured in a YouTube video, and that drew too much attention. I've gotten messages from people accusing me of deleting it myself, but I didn't. I even tried to have it reinstated, but it didn't work. So for those who missed it, here's the short version. I have 2 daughters. Mason's family hadn't seen a girl born in over a century. When our first daughter arrived, Lorraine started claiming I must have cheated. When we found out our second was a girl too, she lost it, accused me to my face. Then she assaulted me while I was nearly 9 months pregnant. Mason intervened and accidentally hurt her while protecting me. Police got involved. Reports were filed. The baby was okay, despite the fact that Lorraine kicked me while I was curled on the ground. A doctor later explained the physics to me, said my baby was like an egg inside a water balloon, hard to reach. But that analogy didn't bring me comfort, not when I remember the panic, the blood, the pain. After we came home, we tried to pick up the pieces. Mason was incredible, calm, present, the kind of father I always hoped my children would have. We went no contact with his parents. We filed for protective orders. I even suggested getting legal paternity tests for both girls, not because we doubted, but because we wanted the proof, the evidence, something to shut this madness down once and for all. Our attorney recommended we file through the court to avoid any questions of legitimacy. So we started the process. It felt like the right thing. But then something shifted. Mason grew quieter, angrier. He started having second thoughts, not about me, but about his mom. He asked me if maybe, just maybe, we were being too harsh. She's old, he said. She's not well. Maybe she didn't know what she was doing. I stared at him, stunned. She knew, I said. She screamed that I was a whore. She slapped me, kicked me. Do you think age gives her a free pass? He didn't answer. I told him she'll be screened during the trial. If there's something wrong with her mind, they'll find it. But even if she's sick, it doesn't erase what she did. Age doesn't mean she gets to break me. Not again. If Lorraine is truly suffering from something cognitive, then fine, she'll be evaluated in court. If she's diagnosed with something legitimate, I'll deal with that reality. But that doesn't mean I ever want to be around her again, and it certainly doesn't mean she should ever be near my daughters. A few days later, still swollen, exhausted, and on bed rest, I found out something that broke me more than any bruise or hospital stay had. Mason had been speaking with Greg and Lorraine behind my back. He'd been calling them, texting them, having full conversations like none of this had happened. We fought. Of course we did. He told me that he still wanted his mother to meet our new baby once she was born. That we could pause everything, the charges, the orders, the trauma, until she held her granddaughter, and then after that, we could pick it all up again. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed, barely able to breathe through my tears, as I asked him how he could do this, how he could pretend any of this was okay. I thought he was standing beside me, but in just 4 days he'd caved to her all over again. I reminded him that we had filed for both a restraining order and a no-contact order. I told him he'd broken it. He just stared at me and said, "Well, the no-contact is issued to you, not me. The restraining order hasn't even been granted yet, so she could still come meet the baby before anything's official." All I could do was shake my head and cry. I told him absolutely not. I told him she would never be allowed near me or our daughters again. She could have killed us. She tried to. But Mason just sighed, said I was overreacting. The baby wasn't even hurt, he said. She wasn't aiming for the baby. She was just angry at you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man who once stood between me and the woman who called me a whore was now saying the baby, inside me, wasn't her target, as if that made it better. "She kicked my pregnant belly," I said through gritted teeth. "She threw a snow globe at my skull, Mason." We argued again. He told me I was holding a grudge, refusing to forgive, being unreasonable. And then, just like that, he left. He went to her, to Lorraine, 3 hours away. He didn't come home that night, or the next, or the one after that. He called me, sobbing, on the second day. Told me that if I could just see her, just see how broken she looked, laid up on the couch, unable to walk, bandaged fingers and neck brace, I'd understand. That the least I could do was let her meet her grandchild before we figured out the rest. I was stunned. He had left me here, on bed rest, with stitches in my scalp, with our 2-year-old who still cries at night because she doesn't understand why Grandma turned into a monster. And now he wanted me to feel sorry for the woman who did this. I had 8 pounds of baby in my womb that refused to come out, and I was alone. I was so tired. Mason didn't come home for 4 full days. The morning I was due to be induced, he showed up. My sister had come over to stay with our daughter, and Mason drove me to the hospital. I said very little during the drive. I felt like I didn't know him anymore. At the hospital, they prepped me for induction. I was cold with him, distant. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just didn't have anything left in me. He sat nearby on his tablet for most of it, only occasionally glancing up. I stared at the ceiling for hours, waiting. Finally, my body began to respond. The contractions came stronger, and I felt the baby begin to move down. I was nearing the point where I had to push, gripping the bed with both hands and trying to focus through the pain. No drugs, just agony. And then Mason, now standing at my side, looked at the crown of the baby's head and then turned to the nurse. With an utterly flat tone, he asked, "When did you do the paternity test?" Time froze. I stared at him in disbelief and screamed, "What the hell, Mason?" The nurse blinked, speechless. The doctor paused, then turned to him and said, "Sir, we're here to safely deliver this baby. If you have personal matters to resolve, you'll need to do it after." But the damage was already done. I broke into sobs right there as I was trying to bring life into the world. I stammered out, "It's his baby. His mother is just insane." But the staff looked at me like they didn't know what to believe. I felt completely humiliated. That sacred moment, those minutes where I was supposed to feel proud and strong and overwhelmed with love, they were stolen from me. My body shut down. The time between crowning and delivery dragged out painfully. I couldn't stop crying. I felt numb, betrayed. When our daughter was finally born, I held her tightly to my chest. She was perfect, so tiny, so innocent. But I couldn't let Mason hold her. I couldn't even look at him. I didn't recognize the man beside me anymore. I couldn't even bring myself to look at Mason. I hate that it's true, but I wouldn't let him hold our newborn daughter. I was so full of pain, so full of fury, that I couldn't trust him with something so pure. He'd abandoned us in the final days before her birth, and now he wanted to step back in like nothing had happened. When he returned to the hospital an hour later, he casually said his mother wanted pictures of the baby. Without asking, he pulled out his phone. I didn't even think, I just smacked it out of his hand. He glared at me, said nothing, and walked out of the room. My sister ended up being the one who came to take us home. Mason didn't even ask if we needed help. 2 days later, as required by state law, we had to bring the baby in for her postnatal checkup to ensure she was gaining weight and showing no signs of neglect. After that, we drove directly to the clinic to complete the court-requested paternity test. The next few days were awful. Mason barely spoke to me. He didn't look at the baby. He barely acknowledged our toddler, who was already struggling with the change. He became a ghost in our home, physically present but emotionally absent. I tried to keep everything together, but the strain was unbearable. One afternoon, the baby was crying, my stitches ached, and our toddler was sobbing because the Netflix wouldn't load. I was completely overwhelmed, tears welling in my eyes, when Mason, clearly annoyed, muttered to our toddler, "Mommy didn't pay the Netflix bill because she's mad at Grandma." I lost it. I told him never to speak to our child like that. It wasn't true. I had just forgotten. It had nothing to do with his mother. He rolled his eyes, said she uses our account at her house, so he assumed I had cut her off. That didn't make it okay. Over the next few days, he continued making these little digs. "Daddy's going to see Grandma. You can't come because Mommy hates her." Then he'd leave me alone with our toddler, who would spiral into hysterics, clinging to me and screaming that she wanted to go too. I had a newborn on my chest, an aching body, and a sobbing 2-year-old on my leg. I've never felt so depleted. I know my hormones were a mess. I know postpartum depression is real, but it wasn't just that. I seriously thought about telling him I wanted a divorce right then, right there. He left again after another fight. I called myself to wait, to breathe, to calm down, but I couldn't. Something inside me had snapped. I kept replaying the moment in the hospital when he asked the nurse about the paternity test during the delivery. And I realized I couldn't unhear it. I couldn't unfeel the humiliation. 3 days later, the paternity results came in. Mason opened the envelope and read it, then burst into tears. "I knew it," he said. "I never really doubted it." I stared at him. "Then why did you say that? In the delivery room, in front of everyone?" He had no answer, just more tears. I told him we needed to do a second test for our oldest daughter, not because he deserved reassurance, but because I needed it, documented for the court. He broke down. "I don't need that test," he said. "I know she's mine." "I need it," I said. "I need proof, not because of me, but because of your mother, because you let her poison this entire family." He begged me not to go through with it, reached for me, tried to hold me, but I stepped away. "I never cheated on you," I said, "on anyone, and you humiliated me in the most vulnerable moment of my life. You let your mother convince you that I was unfaithful. And even if part of you didn't believe it, you still let the doubt exist in the room where I gave birth. That night, I packed a few bags. My oldest daughter, my newborn, and I left for my sister's house. I needed space. I needed clarity. I needed air that wasn't soaked in his mother's madness. Mason texted me the next morning. He said he wasn't going to take the second test. Instead, he was going to make Lorraine write a long apology letter to me. He begged me to come home. But I can't. I don't see him the same anymore. The love I once had for him feels like it's been torn away, piece by piece, word by word. Every time he calls, I think maybe I'll feel something again. But I don't. I just feel numb. I told him he could see the girls anytime he wanted, but his mother would never be allowed near them again, ever. Now I'm trying to navigate my emotions, give myself time to sort through the wreckage. But deep down, I know. This isn't a rough patch. This isn't something time will heal. He keeps calling, keeps pushing. But I already feel like I've crossed the line between forgiveness and finality. And I don't think there's any going back. After everything, Mason still chose the crazy train. Just days after I gave birth to our youngest, he left, packed a bag, and drove off to stay at Lorraine's house, like he hadn't just watched his wife give birth while bleeding and sobbing and stitched together. He abandoned me and both our girls. And when I say abandoned, I mean it. He left behind 2 children, one just days old, and the woman he once vowed to protect. He used the baby like a bargaining chip, like some kind of twisted leverage to get me to ask for leniency in the assault case against his mother. He told me that if I wanted him to come home, to be a family again, I needed to tell the court that I believed Lorraine didn't mean to hurt me. We had just done the paternity test for our newborn daughter, the one he demanded because his mother filled his head with poison. And when it came back proving he was the father, everything changed again. Like a switch being flipped, he suddenly acted like everything was fine. He refused to do the test for our oldest daughter, saying that his refusal somehow proved he trusted me. He began begging me to forgive him. He acted overly sweet, overly affectionate, trying to rewind time with forced tenderness. But honestly, it disgusted me. Because while he was trying to act like the doting husband again, he had turned into a stranger to our oldest daughter. Mason had been an amazing father to her once, loving, present, gentle. She was his princess, his sweet pea, his baby girl. But after Lorraine's accusations, that all disappeared. He became cruel, flat out cold. He snapped at her, called her things like Paula, a name with no affection behind it, whiny brat, and even annoying toad. She's terrified of frogs and toads. It felt deliberate. He began to emotionally push her away. Every time she cried or looked to him for comfort, he'd tell her, "Go to your mom," as if he couldn't bear to deal with her emotions, as if she was a problem that belonged to me. He even told her things like, "Mommy hates Grandma, so you can't come with me." Then he'd walk out the door and leave me with a sobbing toddler and a wailing infant. It didn't take long before it started affecting her deeply. She was only 2.5, too young to understand his words, but not too young to feel the shift. She began putting herself in timeout when Mason would leave, whispering sorry under her breath like she thought she'd done something wrong. She started having tantrums that came out of nowhere. I could feel her confusion, her hurt. It broke my heart in ways I didn't know were possible. I confronted Mason about it, told him that mistreatment is mistreatment, whether or not a toddler fully understands, that what he was doing to her was cruel. He didn't say much, just sat there, looking at the floor. And that silence was all I needed to hear. I stayed at my sister's after that. I couldn't sleep next to someone who could treat our daughter like that. I looked at him and saw nothing. No warmth, no love. Just the man who fathered my girls. That was it. It's been almost 4 months since the paternity results came in. Mason has spent every week since then trying to win me back. Calls, texts, emails. But I told him plainly, I don't love him anymore. Not after the way he treated me, and especially not after how he treated our daughters over his mother's delusions. I gave him the divorce papers a month after moving in with my sister. He refused to sign. He told me, "You're not leaving me. The day you leave is the day you become a single mom." I was stunned. Not only did he not try to fight for the marriage when it mattered, he was now trying to manipulate me through fear. He stopped visiting the girls, said he wouldn't see them again until I dropped the divorce and agreed to come home. He's making me out to be the villain, but he's the one withholding love from his children like it's some sort of punishment for me. Lorraine is thrilled. She's vague posting on Facebook, talking about how happy she is for her son and his fresh start. She's also playing the victim, posting that she hasn't been able to see her granddaughters because of lies, that she's being kept away by someone bitter. She leaves out the part where she assaulted her pregnant daughter-in-law and nearly caused irreparable harm. And now I sit here wondering, what do I do? Do I accept that I'm going to be a single mother, even if Mason eventually gives up on trying to force me back? How do I protect my girls from him popping in and out of their lives, showing up only when it serves him, disappearing when he doesn't get his way? I can't let them grow up thinking love is conditional like this. A couple of months later, I posted again. I had news. I'm pregnant. And my ex-husband is going to lose his mind. I'm pregnant again, 16 weeks along to be exact, and it's a boy. I haven't told Mason yet. Part of me assumed he'd figure it out when the bump starts to show, when I begin to swell in ways that feel familiar and terrifying at the same time. We'll tell the girls in a few weeks, once we figure out how to do it gently, especially for our oldest. She's been through enough upheaval already. But I know the conversation with Mason is coming, and I don't know how to have it. He's going to ask. He's going to look me in the eyes, ask if I'm carrying another girl, and I'll have to tell him the truth. That this time, it's a boy. And I don't know how he's going to take it. I don't even know how I feel about it. There's a part of me that's scared. Not because of the baby, but because of what his existence might stir in Mason. The man who abandoned me, our daughters, and everything we tried to build, because of some cruel lie his mother whispered into his ear. My sister says I shouldn't tell him at all. She says I should say we're waiting until birth to find out. Spare myself the drama for a few more months. My mom and a few close friends think the opposite. They say tell him now, give him time to adjust, to grieve what he thinks he lost. Let him wrestle with it before the baby arrives. But I don't think it's grief that will come. I think it'll be rage, jealousy, a wave of bitterness that will swallow him whole. How do I tell the man who once screamed that he didn't believe his daughters were his because they were girls, that I'm now having a son with someone else? A man who treats my daughters like they're invisible unless I bend to his will. How do I tell him that someone else is stepping into the role he so easily threw away? I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know when or how I'm supposed to bring it up. And then, before I could even decide, I came across a post on Reddit. It was from Mason. He titled it, "I want my pregnant ex-wife and family back." It was posted about 3 weeks after he found out I was expecting. No one sent it to me. I just stumbled across it. My hands trembled as I read it. The words blurred a few times, tears stinging my eyes, not because they were sweet, but because they hurt. He admitted that 2 years ago, right before our second daughter was born, Lorraine got into his head, told him over and over that no Hale man had ever produced a daughter, that I had to have cheated, that the baby couldn't be his. He said he started to see things, convince himself of things that weren't there, that every time he looked at our girls, he saw his mother's doubt instead of their beauty. He said he knew he'd messed up, that I was right not to trust him, that he spiraled, that after our second was born and I insisted on a paternity test, everything inside him collapsed. He wrote that I told him I couldn't look at him the same way anymore, that the love we had was gone. He was right. He also said that when I handed him the divorce papers, he refused to sign, told me that if I really hated him that much, he'd give up custody and let me be a single mom, that it was a tantrum, an emotional nuke he dropped out of shame and fear. He said he regrets it every day. We did divorce, eventually. It's been 2 years. Since then, he sees the girls on weekends, picks our oldest up from preschool 3 times a week. From the outside, it might look like we've managed to co-parent successfully. But he knows, and I know, there's a wall between us now, a thick, aching wall that no amount of parenting schedules or polite texts can tear down. He knows I'm engaged. To Daniel, the man I've been dating for 16 months, a college friend I never saw coming until the moment he stepped in and gave me the steady ground I'd been desperate for. He knows Daniel is good to the girls, that he's the only father figure our youngest has ever really known. Mason said in his post that when I told him we were expecting, I said it with zero emotion, then turned and walked inside. He said it felt like watching someone else live the life that should have been his, that he's not ready to be a father to someone else's kids with his current girlfriend, that he's not even sure he wants to marry her. He said he got drunk that night and tried to call me, that he was glad I didn't answer, said he would have begged me to take him back, promised to raise the new baby as his own, said it was pathetic, said he knows it's his fault. The part that hurt most wasn't the self-pity. It was that he wrote he has to pretend he's okay with all this, that he doesn't even know how to be in the same room as me without spilling every feeling he's tried to bury. He ended the post with something that made my breath catch in my throat. I cut my mom off 8 months ago. I was brutal. She knows I regret listening to her. She's not in my life anymore. But that doesn't change what I did. No, it doesn't. I regret ever listening to Lorraine's poison. The lies, the manipulation, it all seems so obvious now, like warning sirens I chose to ignore. She's no longer in my life. I cut that cord completely. And when I had to choose between her and my daughters, I chose them. I chose what mattered. I just wish I hadn't waited so long. Some people talk like I walked away from my girls, like I left them behind in some selfish spiral. But I never did. I've been there, even in the silence, picking up from daycare, brushing tangled hair, whispering bedtime stories when my heart was breaking. I never stopped loving them. I never stopped trying. I'm looking into therapy now. I know I need help. I've spent so long tangled in guilt, I've forgotten how to breathe without it. But healing isn't instant. Therapy isn't a magic switch that erases love or rewrites the past. Some mornings I still wake up thinking about Elise, about everything I lost and everything I destroyed. I need to take a step back for a while. Some of the comments lately have been too much, brutal, maybe deserved, but still heavy. I carry enough of that already. This whole thing, it's been a disaster of my own making. I lit the match. I fanned the flames. And now I'm the one standing in the ashes, hoping one day to feel warm again. Thank you to those who saw me as more than a mistake. I don't expect redemption, but I do hope for peace. Stories like Elise and Mason's aren't just stories. They happen around us every day. Toxic family dynamics, manipulative parents, and emotional instability can destroy even the strongest relationships if left unchecked. If you're in a relationship where someone else's influence controls your partner, or where you feel constantly gaslit, unheard, or unsafe, listen to those warning signs. They don't go away on their own. If you've been harmed by a partner who sided with toxic family, know this: you are not responsible for their failure to protect you. Your safety, your dignity, and your mental health matter. One piece of practical advice: document everything. If there's verbal or emotional abuse, keep records. If there's physical violence, seek help immediately. Hospital records and legal support may later be essential. Set clear boundaries. Even if you still love someone, even if it's family, you have the right to draw the line between forgiveness and self-preservation. You don't owe anyone access to your life if they've proven they'll harm it. Finally, don't wait for people to change to start healing yourself. Go to therapy. Build your support system. Let yourself feel the grief, but also let yourself envision a future without fear. Healing isn't quick, but it's possible, and you deserve it.